So welcome back to the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Leadership Development Podcast, where we explore elements of today's fire service. This podcast is for Metro Chiefs by Metro Chiefs, engaging in conversations about the challenges and opportunities that matter the most to leaders in our association. And while this series is created with Metro members in mind, the topics we explore are relevant to all fire service organizations and current or aspiring chief officers around the globe. And so this is actually a special edition of the Leadership Development Podcast. So we're taking a little bit of a pivot with this particular one. And our sponsor of this episode is LifeScan, and we are going to explore in depth some wellness issues around the fire service. And so I welcome Todd LeDuc first. Todd is the President and CEO, Grand Poobah, Supreme Allied Commander, I think, something like that, for LifeScan. And so he's here with us today. Todd, do you just want to touch on a little bit about LifeScan and perhaps why you found it important to work with the Metro Chiefs to put together this podcast?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate your leadership with this initiative and the podcast itself for the members of Metro. Having served for 30 some odd years in a Metro department in a chief officer role, it's become very evident over a long time of my service and of those on this podcast of the importance of taking care of our members. And with that, my transition into the role of CEO of LifeScan, the nation's largest provider of healthcare physicals for public safety. Metro has always been said to lead the way, and certainly it does. We've been blessed to, be a partner with Metro for almost 2 decades. So we wanted a partnership and extend kind of the podcast that you've been doing and focusing on the key areas of best practices in firefighter occupational health, wellness, and safety. And, that, as you know, that's been a passion of mine as not only in the fire service, but my service on the IFC Safety, Health, and Survival Board and now in LifeScan CEO role. So, again, I'll reiterate, as the Metros go, so goes the fire service. So, and some important issues that we're happy to focus on, this being one of them. Mental wellness, behavioral health, resiliency, and we have several more planned for cardiovascular, metabolic wellness, cancer in the fire service. So we're honored to sponsor it, and I couldn't ask for a better group of colleagues to get together today to kick it off. So looking forward to the discussion.
That's awesome. Thank you, Todd. And the colleagues of whom you speak are sitting in front of me. They're smiling faces. And so I'm going to go around the horn and allow them to introduce themselves, who are part of this panel today to talk about this critical issue in behavioral health. And I will start with Don Lombardi.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate that. I'm Don Lombardi. I'm the recent retired fire chief from West Metro Fire Rescue. And it's everything that it's cracked up to be. Let me tell you. So I'm very much involved with the Metro, past president, and have done a lot of things, both from looking at belonging in with the fire service to looking at how we can do better with cancer, how we can do better with cardiac, how we can do better certainly with mental health. So I have a few little things I get to bring today. And so hopefully, I think through our conversations, we can give some nuggets to our Metro Chiefs, which I'm really excited about.
Awesome. Thank you. And I will keep going clockwise here, at least on my screen. Brittany Hollerback, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Brittany Hollerback. I'm a researcher. I work with Dr. Sarah Jakey. My background's in the fire service. I was a volunteer firefighter first, and then went back to school, got my degree in kinesiology, and started working with Sarah and her team. So we do a lot of different research with the fire service. I am, as a former firefighter, I'm interested in all the things, but we look a lot at the behavioral health of the firefighter. So what modifiable risk factors can we focus on to try and lessen health issues? So we've looked at everything from cancer to cardiovascular disease to sleep, exercise, nutrition, etc. So thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here today.
Great to see you. Great to meet you. And this person I've never seen before ever in my whole life. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners for those of whom don't already know you?
Yeah, I'm Sarah, and I am the herder of nerds. I actually got on ChatGPT the other day, and it said, like, you can ask it, like, what's my spirit animal based on what you know about me? And it said it was a border collie, which I think,
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of boring. Everyone else is something really cool, and I'm a border collie. But I work with Brittany, and when she tells me to do something, I do it. But in addition, I direct the Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health Research. Been doing research almost 20 years now, which makes me seem really old, but wise is what I'm going to go with instead. And yeah, I've done some a little bit of everything, and I actually have some data on fire chiefs and the mental health of fire chiefs. So I'm kind of excited about this conversation. I think we've made a lot of progress in the fire service talking about behavioral health, but I think we've done like the peer support amazingly well, and we validated that as a benefit. But I think it's time to start talking about fire chiefs and what they face. Frankly, that says that it's the loneliest job in fire service. So I'm like, oh yeah. And I actually was raised by a fire chief. My dad took over Overland Park when I was and started kindergarten, and he retired when I graduated from high school. So I spent all my formative years being raised by a fire chief, which I think is like part of the reason I have I'm trying to be appropriate, unique sense of humor. I get it from my dad.
That tracks.
Yeah. And see how appropriate it was the way I said that?
You did a really good job. I'm not sure how good the editor is at making the little beep sounds and like extracting the F-bombs that Sarah drops from time to time. At least we're not drinking margaritas when we're recording this episode, because that's pretty helpful. That would be problematic.
That's not appropriate.
Allegedly. I feel very judged. Well, it's great to see all of you. Brittany, it's great to meet you. My name is Alec Otten. I'm the host of the Leadership Development Podcast for the Metro Chiefs. I'm currently the fire chief of Aurora Fire Rescue. I've been here for 2.5 years and came out of Virginia's fire service. This is actually a really meaningful conversation to me, having lived through, I guess it was 4 suicides in my previous department. And 2 of those in a executive leadership position. Boy, they impact you as a leader, and they impact their peers. Obviously, the fire service family, it's devastating for them, and that never goes away, right? It's a huge ripple effect, and so I'm very, very interested to hear from this group about what emerging solutions and all those kinds of things are in place, and what kind of leading practices are being employed to reduce the risk. I love what you said, Brittany, in your introduction, was the risks that we can mitigate, right? I can't remember exactly how you said it, right? But there's risks we can't mitigate, and then there are ones that we can, that really improve the resilience. So I want to dig into that and learn more about that. But my first question is really just kind of setting the stage, right? What does behavioral health mean in the context of the fire service? I think everybody has their own impression of it, and probably outside the fire service might mean something very different than it means inside. So I'd really like to start, Sarah, if you don't mind taking that question. In your opinion, what does behavioral health mean in the context of our industry?
So it's interesting because there's a kind of a debate about, should we call it mental health? Should we call it behavioral health? Is mental health part of behavioral health? What I've kind of settled on, we switched to behavioral health because people felt like it was less stigmatizing. What I think when we talk about behavioral health, we are talking about both mental health, mental wellness, and all the health behaviors that go into overall health, overall health and wellness in terms of your health behaviors, and then mental health in terms of I actually think they are a little bit different now, which I wouldn't have said 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, but mental health then is a part of behavioral health is the way I think about it. So behavioral health is the umbrella, mental health or disorders of mental health, I think kind of fall underneath that. Does that make sense?
It does. Brittany, you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, I would add, I don't even know that's I think just to round up what Sarah's saying, I think it's like the full range of the mental, the emotional, the social well-being. Like, so it's not, we call it behavioral health. It's not just about your behaviors, but it's the way firefighters think and how they feel and how they perform on and off duty. And Chief, back to what you said about the modifiable risk factors, we understand that it's a dangerous job. Firefighters know that joining the job and going to work, their families understand it's a dangerous job, and scientists understand it's a dangerous job. So how can we change the way we as firefighters act on and off the job? How can we change the things that we do around our career, whether that be sleep, whether that be the gear that we operate in, the equipment that we operate with? How do we change the job so that we operate in the safest possible environment? That to me is kind of what behavioral health is.
Dawn, the conversations around this have probably changed over the years. You recently retired, you lucky son of a gun, from West Metro after 3 decades.
Yeah, 34 years and then 14 as the fire chief.
That's a lot, right? But you've gotten to watch a lot change in the industry. So were we talking about this 34 years ago? And if we weren't talking about this 34 years ago, why now? Why has it become a topic that we're discussing, that we're sitting here, that Todd and LifeScan is really encouraging us to really have multiple episodes around?
Well, first of all, I applaud everybody for what they're doing, what Todd's doing, and Sarah and Brittany, and a huge team of folks that recognize. And I think in looking at this, what they're doing now is kind of peeling back these layers of this onion, and as they find something or they think they find something, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. We never talked about sleep, ever. And then now we find out that might be a catalyst for a lot of things. But when I first got on, it was just a different era. The leaders that I had were the do it and dig it type of a thing. And a lot of them came from the Vietnam era or from when they were in the military. And so you had that do it and dig it type of a style. And if you didn't like it, then you sucked it up. And my generation or my era of firefighters, we are super, super good at compartmentalizing. And that if something yucky happened or something that affected us, we wouldn't talk about it. We would put it in somewhere and store it somewhere and not talk about it. But that led to other things when we would get home, performance issues at work, all of those types of things that led to this. So I think now, fast forward, that you look culturally and our workforce today, because of how they grew up and how they are, doesn't allow that. They don't want those types of things. And so in turn, I think now it's becoming where we're talking about it more and allowing those things to happen. And Todd brought this up too, is about how do we destigmatize all of this. And Sarah said, we have to look at a different name for this, which still baffles me. It's if we come up with different names for things and then to make it sound better. But nonetheless, as we talk about it from leaders, we talk about it and show that it's okay. Everything's okay, that we can work through a lot of things. And when I talk to my workforce about it, especially from a perspective, from a mental health perspective, was that I've used it. And so, and I've had sought help from professionals. And so when they hear those kind of things, they go, wow, God, if the chief can do it, then certainly I can. So that's one of the things that I want to talk a little bit about for our Metro chiefs, is about that. The era that most all of us grew up in was was much, much different than what it is today. And I think today is now a different time, and we need to be more open about it.
You talked a little bit about the stigma, both you did, both you and Sarah. So it seems like that's changing, right? So from the introduction of this to now, have you seen the attitudes toward acknowledging that there are some behavioral health challenges that we may face as a result of any number of variables, right? Have you seen the attitudes change? And you mentioned something like folks saying, I don't want to have what I take home from work impacting my relationships at home or my sleep at home or the way I parent my children or whatever it bleeds over into. That might help, right? Change the stigma as far as the grassroots kind of asking for these things. But have you seen it change over the years since its introduction?
I think it has changed greatly over the years, and which is good. And the more that we talk about it, the more that we normalize it, I guess, for lack of a better term, and culturalize it and say that it's okay. I've had firefighters call me up on a Sunday night, late and say, Chief, I need help. I'm in a bad place. I need help. And that means a lot to me as the fire chief, that they feel like they can do that. And so they're not all going out and announcing, hey, I'm in a bad place. But certainly they're looking for avenues or they're looking for resources. And the more resources that we have, and the more we talk about those resources, then when they're in their firehouse, they may not be talking about the football game. They might be talking about that yucky call that they had, and then checking in on each other and finding out and saying, is everybody doing okay? Or I noticed you're not sleeping as much, or I noticed you were up late last night when we should all been sleeping. And we look at those types of things to then at least kind of be a springboard for us to talk to folks about it and them open up about it. And I think that's where we're getting better about that people are recognizing not just the fire chief's perspective, but everybody through our ranks are looking for those types of things or noticing those types of things. And so when we talk about this, that we are a family and we've got some funny uncles and some quirky aunts in our family. But as we talk through some of those and we look back to really being that family, we know each other pretty well so that we can identify those. And rather than letting them go, we now talk about them more. So I think that stigma, when I say stigma, I think it's still there, or an underlying part of it's still there, that people don't want to show that they're weak or they have problems. But certainly people are more open about trying to find resources or avenues to get help.
Sarah, are you seeing that same kind of change or shift in attitudes nationally? I mean, you travel all over the U.S. presenting through the Science of the Station programming or presenting at conferences, whether they're local or national. So you have a lot of opportunity to bump into a variety of different departments, large and small and rural and, combination and volunteer or career. Are you seeing that same shift in attitude towards this globally, I'll say?
I would say yes. I think that we wouldn't have had a podcast about this topic, I think, even 10 years ago. And now, I think I've done 4 or 5 in the last 6 months on mental health. So I think Crackle Magazine has all sorts of stuff about, and it's the Firefighter Lifestyle Magazine, it has all sorts of stuff about mental health. So I think we're seeing a shift. I don't think it's everywhere. It's interesting because I think we still have some holdouts, but I always think if you think of in terms of a tipping point or a normal curve, we're going to have the early adopters, we're going to have the majority folks. I think we still have some holdouts, and I think that's okay. Because either they won't get there or they'll retire. So I think that's just what happens. The other thing that is interesting, though, about where we're at is I think sometimes we almost go to the extreme of telling, everyone assumes, oh, I'm going to get PTSD. And where I see the conversation shifting is it's okay to not be okay, but also it's okay to be okay. And so there's now this conversation around where we're shifting to the kind of a strengths based, which I think is awesome, right? I think at first we weren't acknowledging the problem at all. Now we're acknowledging the problem and we're looking at the other side of it and going all right, how can we bolster? And I feel like resilience is a term is a little bit overused. And so it's kind of become a bad word, but there is so much that the fire service does right. And I always think like, if other occupational groups could capture what we do in the fire service, and there's always room for improvement, yes, but I think we're doing so much right. I think the fact that we're at the point where now we can talk about leadership, it's because we've really come up with a lot of resources for the other groups that are out there. And so I think it's a big win. I think it's really easy to get bogged down and feel like, oh, we're all going to get PTSD. No, we're not. But if you start struggling, you need to know what the resources are. Like the fact that we're talking about it actually is doing some of the prevention on PTSD. The fact that we're able to talk about sleep and how memories are made and how your mind works while you're sleeping and how that relates to your mental health. Like those are all wins. We just have to keep doing those things and doing them better, is what I think.
What do you see and this question could be for Brittany or Sarah, what are the most common challenges? You mentioned post-traumatic stress. What are the other common presentations or symptoms of behavioral health challenges that firefighters are facing, really on or off duty, right? I mean, how is this manifesting, and what are the conditions that we as leaders should be most concerned about?
You want me to take it, Britt, or you want to?
You go ahead.
Okay. Definitely PTSD, like that's the most traditional one. Although what's interesting about post-traumatic stress disorder is that we're not seeing it manifest the way that you do in like the diagnosis that you have in DSM, the DSM-5. So when we talk to firefighters, they'll talk about the traditional diagnosis of PTSD is that you're having flashbacks or nightmares about a specific event. They have added a newer version that's more of a chronic exposure, but it tends to be more around, and it does say public safety, but it tends to be more around like domestic violence type things. What we see in the fire service, though, is that firefighters are having flashbacks to their worst calls, but not a worst call typically, unless there's been some major traumatic call. So it's weird, around the like symptoms of post-traumatic stress, even though it might not be the traditional PTSD. We do see a little bit higher rates of depression, like people in the clinical range for depression, anxiety or generalized anxiety type disorders. I think that is something that we see as a manifestation. I think we see more substance use, particularly around alcohol, than we do with other groups. And then also some other pieces that are that we're seeing that aren't necessarily diagnostic categories, but we're seeing quite a bit of burnout right now, especially COVID, post-COVID, and with the with the lack of staffing and the mandatory overtime, those types of things. We're seeing some burnout. We're also seeing some moral injury, which I don't know, does everyone know that term? Like, I didn't know it, and someone started talking to me about it, and I was like, am I the only person that hasn't heard about this? But it's like an injury. It's kind of the psychological injury of being exposed to something that you find to be morally wrong in some way, but often something that you feel like you can't talk about. So I had a paramedic give me an example of being somewhere and was the only person on scene. And I don't think he was a paramedic. I think he was maybe an EMT, but whatever it was, he was not licensed to do some certain thing that he felt like he could have helped the person that was suffering. And so kind of this moral injury around that. And the other thing I'm hearing from fire service is some moral injury around things that are happening in the firehouse, whether it's mistreating someone, bullying. And then for fire chiefs, sometimes like you're put in difficult situations where you might have to say no to something that you believe in because there's the funds for it. You can't get the city. I mean, you're like you've got some specific tasks and you're kind of in a no-win situation sometimes where you might morally want to do all the things for your firefighters that you just can't do because your hands are tied. So it's been interesting. And I think hearing about the moral injury, but on the other side of it, post-traumatic growth and the concept that when you are exposed to all these really horrible things, it gives you more appreciation for your life and what you do have. So I think kind of all of those pieces play into it and into what we're seeing.
You touched on the substance use as an example of how some of these things that whether it's post-traumatic stress or other behavioral health challenges might show up, right? Can we talk through how it's like signs or indicators, whether that's at work or at home, how some of these issues might show up. Brittany, I don't know if you're observing these things, and you can speak to that. How does this show up? I'm hanging out with my friends, right? And I'm constantly aware of who they are and how they're feeling. Like, what am I seeing in their relationships, in their home, in their work presentation that might give me an indicator that there's something going on?
Yeah, Chief, I think that's such a good question. And I think it's not just firefighters that don't recognize or identify signs and symptoms. It's all of us as humans. We don't do a good job. And I think partially we convince ourselves that they're okay. Friends, colleagues, right? Like, you could be talking to a colleague that you see every day and they could be really down and depressed. And so often we don't see it. And I think part of that is we're not trained to pick up on little tiny cues in people's behavior and their mannerisms and just the things that they say. We're not looking for those things, right? Like a psychologist would look at human behavior when someone comes and sits down and talks to you. We're not trained to do that. So it can be, tiny little things in the way that your outlook on life is suddenly maybe a bit more downtrodden. You don't have as much zeal for life as you did before. Sometimes it shows up in frustration, right? Like, you come in with this road rage and you're just like quick tempered. And we've all felt that way as well, right? Like, if I'm dealing with something in my personal life, I find that my temper is a bit shorter, even when I come to work, and has nothing to do with the people at work or my work topics. It's because I have less space emotionally to give of myself to those things. So look for people that are suddenly short tempered, that are normally really easygoing. Look for, language that's different, whether they're cursing more or they're using more dark language. Sometimes it's things that don't necessarily make sense, and you look at the person kind of like, what are you talking about, and they can just seem a bit off. So sometimes it's just noticing little things and having the courage to speak up and say, hey, you seem a little off today, or that seems to be a funny thing that you just said. Tell me more about that, or how are you feeling, or even how are things at home, or and it can be the tiniest conversation starter that just gives someone the opportunity to be open with you about whatever's going on.
So peers have a role in identifying and helping out. What do you see, Sarah, there? You're nodding. I want to hear what you have to say about what that line level role, that peer role, is in identifying and intervening.
That's really your front line of people. And it's interesting because it's not just the peer supporters in an organization. And when we think about fire chiefs, it's not just your initial kind of folks around you. It's really, you've got you in the center of it, and then you have the people that you spend every day with. So that's going to be your family and your crew. And again, Lido says everyone is a peer, so everyone needs to be a peer supporter, because really it's the people that you spend every day with. Like Brittany said, if you're being more of an asshole than usual, someone needs to be like, hey, what is going on, right? So that's going to be your front line. And then beyond that is where we have our trained peer supporters, where if it's something that you can't say, and I think one of the challenges that we've had in the fire service, we've done a great job on peer support. I think we need to go both in and out, where where do we send people for resources if they're really struggling, if it's beyond something to be taken care of at the kitchen table. And then I think we also need to do some more education of the folks who are just your day-to-day people, and the folks who are the folks who are going to see those signs and symptoms ahead of time. Are you drinking more? Are you all those types of things? So, yeah. And I think we used to be able to say we couldn't quantify the benefit of the kitchen table, or I used to say that. We recently did a study looking at people who don't have the support in the organizational level. So people firefighters in particular, who feel like they're not supported, who feel like they're treated poorly at work. And you'd see double and triple the rates of post-traumatic stress and depression. So really we can quantify it, and the benefit is significant. Just having that that camaraderie. And back to the chief level, you don't have a natural other person that is your peer when you're a fire chief. So you really have to be proactive in seeking those folks out. And it might not even be within your own department. It might be that you connect. And that's one of the things I love about Metro. Like, you go to one of those conferences and there are other people there who get the shit that you are seeing on a daily basis, and who get, when it's your time in the bucket, that show up for you, because people are going to take their cheap shots, whether it's city council or the department or, and you got to have people who understand that and can help in that moment.
I love that you're paying attention to that, because I think a lot of times fire chiefs are looking at, what's my role in, and Don, I'm going to throw this question to you, really what role does leadership play in building programming or creating kind of a healthy culture around this issue? But I'm glad you're looking at that and talking about that, because I think it's really hard for us to develop policies or programs that are for ourselves, right? And I share your assessment of the Metro Chiefs organization, and the conference is like an incredible release, right? When you're around people who just get it, right? Get what you're dealing with and what you're going through, and we see it all the time. I think you used the term transition, right? And you have people who are transitioning in and out of these leadership roles, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not, and having a peer group around you that recognizes the impact of that happening. But Don, to you, what role, as a fire chief West Metro, what was your role in creating programming or infrastructure or shaping this healthy culture?
Well, it was quite a bit, and so if you don't mind, I got to go back a little bit. And like you, right after I became fire chief, we had 2 suicides and an unspecified death, all within about 3 months. 2 of the folks that took their life, I grew up with. I came on with them, went through paramedic school. We were close, and it was difficult. And at the time, I didn't have. When I talk about resources, I didn't have resources at all. I was brand new fire chief, and so I did what I thought was best. But I knew that, how to take care of the organization and do those types of things for the organization. And one of the things that we did, and you're right, Sarah, it's an overused word right now, but we really started to work on resiliency. What I wanted to do was not do a checkbox. That could not happen, because everybody could see through all of that and not buy into it. And so we picked up actually from our friend Mary Camelli over at Mesa. They have a wonderful program, and we stole that from them, and we had training on that and put everybody through our resiliency for that. And that was a big deal. That helped kind of set some things up. So Brittany, when you talk about not being able to identify or we're not trained, I think if we put things in place for our firefighters and for our personnel and our members, that they don't have to be counselors. They don't have to be, Sigmund Freud to go, oh my gosh, you've got this. But if they see some things from their resiliency training that they go, that's off a little bit, that's the catalyst for that. So Alec, that was kind of the start of it. And then from there, we built on doing more programs or more areas and resources for mental health. And at West Metro, we have strategic planning teams. You and I have talked about this, where these strategic planning teams work on other things. People call them committees. Committees don't work. But we have a strategic planning team like for apparatus, and strategic planning team for standard of cover. We have 10 of them, but one of them is for wellness. And so we have a co-chair from labor, a co-chair from management that run this team. And they put together some unbelievably great programs. And what my job was to do was they would make recommendations, and my job was to approve and pretty much get out of their way. So they helped redevelop our chaplain program, our peer support. One of our firefighters who had one of our firefighters who had experience with equine with horses. Her and her family. She came to me for a dog support. And so ours is a little bit different at West Metro than some others. I mean, they're certified and trained, but they're owned by their firefighter, and they come with them to shift. So we probably have, I think, now about 20 therapy dogs that help out. And so if there's a yucky call, we can, if it's not at that station where a dog is, we can move them around to get the dogs. So some of the other things that helped lead up to some of our successes was the board of directors also noticed that we were busy and that there was a lot going on. So during negotiations several years ago, the union negotiated all their contract and their wages and benefits and all this other stuff. And then the board came back and said, okay, we want to give you something. We want to give you 2, and at the time they didn't have a name for it, but we call them self-care days. They go, we want to give you 2 mental health days. And you don't have to use sick leave, you don't have to use vacation. And in essence, if you need a bloke, you need to get away from, sometimes you go, I just can't go to work today. If you need those types of days, you got 2 days throughout the year. They're not cumulative or anything like that. But what it does is it helps our folks know that they've got a day where they can get away or not be at work when they don't need to be. And so some people said, well, they're going to abuse that. They're going to go and they're going to go fishing, or they're going to go blah, blah, blah. And I said, who am I to say that fishing doesn't give them, put them back into line, or that they get to go to their daughter's last soccer game, and that's important to them, or they get to work on finances with their spouse because things are yucky at home because of finances. So it's probably about a 90 some odd, probably 98% use rate. So my board of directors asked me, they go, do we have a mental health issue here at West Metro because they're using so much of their self-care days? I said, we could look at it that way. I said, let's look at it the other way. I said, we allow them to use those, and because we have those and they use them, we don't have as much of a problem. I'm not saying we're perfect and that we don't have any mental health problems, but this helps lessen that because they have those. And people, one of the things, actually, when I was retiring, a lot of firefighters came up to me and thanked me to get those for them because they said, it's nice to know that we have those in essence in our back pocket. And so those were all helpful. Now we were able to capitalize on that. We've hired a mental health coordinator for West Metro, and she is wonderful. And so she helps, she can work, she can be a counselor in crisis if needed, like immediate. But her main job is to be really kind of a traffic cop to help firefighters and our civilian staff navigate and help get them in the right spots that they need to be, to show them that you may be doing better over with this type of treatment as opposed to that type, and puts out plans and makes them work for us. That added a lot of comfort to our folks, a lot. And so all of that really kind of built up and has been helpful for the mental health programs that we have at West Metro to make it a success. We've talked about that a lot at West Metro, and how our folks feel like they have avenues to go through and they have things that they can take care of, and that they have the resources to do all that. So from a fire chief's perspective, at first I had a lot of influence on what we did, but once we started turning this big, huge wheel, then all of a sudden I had the organization, people within our organization doing a lot of the work, doing a lot of the ideas, being innovative and coming up with stuff. So I could step back and it was really theirs and they could buy into all of that. And that was what helped make it a success as well, too. But from a fire chief's perspective, and just really quick, if you don't mind, to go back to those suicides, and this goes back to what Sarah and Brittany said, was I felt like I was in the right spot organizationally to lead the organization, even though I was grieving for those 2 firefighters that I grew up with. But I wasn't, people were, and I was grieving, I felt like I was grieving for me appropriately. And I had people coming up to me saying, "Are you okay? Are you doing okay? And make sure you take care of yourself." And after a while, I felt bad. I wasn't feeling bad, but then after a while, I was feeling bad because I wasn't feeling bad. And so that's when I sought some help. And I went and saw a counselor, and she was telling me, she goes, I told this exact same story to her. And she goes, "It's okay to feel okay, even in that stuff." And that was such a freeing thing for me to be able to have that. And especially with, as you know, Alec, there's a lot of burden on us as a fire chief. We're the end point. And so we don't get to talk to a lot of people or try to relate to and say, "Hey, I know, I know you're going through this." And so we don't have many people to rely on to go, "I feel like this, and I just need some help, or I need to talk to someone about that." And again, going back to, that's why the Metro is so super important about this, because I have called up my fellow fire chiefs within the Metro and said, "I've got this going on. It is weighing me down. What do you think?" And as they give me some insights on things, again, it's like a breath of fresh air. It feels like a weight's being lifted off of me as I talk through some of those. And then it validates some of the things that I do, so I don't feel like, this dummy or this goofball for thinking those types of things. And so that's the power of the Metro, especially in this mental health or this mental wellness perspective. And that's one thing that we're going to be trying to do, is to really accentuate that and really put some light on that as fire chiefs, we've done all this stuff for our firefighters. It's okay for us as fire chiefs to ask for help. And we need to be doing that, because as we do that, that will open us up even more and be better leaders.
That's awesome.
Sorry for the long response.
No, it's okay. No, I asked you the question. I'm really glad that you shared not just what you've done operationally, but also the personal piece of it. I'm really grateful for that. I think we understate that pretty frequently. So we build out a lot of these programs. I'm hearing peer support. I'm hearing chaplain. I'm hearing the K9 program, and the wellness days and things like that. And these are pretty broad brush, right? So they can cover a lot of bases. Right. Sarah, I'm asking you, because apparently more research is always needed. But what are you? I know that was your favorite phrase. What is the research saying about what are the emerging and critical issues, and are the programs that we're implementing, these large kind of overarching programs with chaplaincy and peer support and wellness days and K9 programs and equine therapy, are we hitting the mark, or are we missing it? And are we having an impact on wellness with the programs that we're implementing based on your research?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for your brief answer. I'm just kidding. I know there's more. There's always more. Don, did you hear how she answered that question?
I know. Yeah. That was short and sweet. Sarah, thanks. Sorry. Now you make me look silly. Now I feel odd.
No. I 100%. I do think that they are working. And I think it's interesting, though, when you look at some of the data that's coming out about the different programs that are out there, sometimes you'll see actually rates of mental health disorders go up. Like if you evaluate, like I know that you've worked with companies that do screenings like Frontline, that are first responder behavioral health, that does the screenings. And then the second year you see an increase rate and you're like, oh shit, we're doing this wrong. One of the things that we have to be prepared for is sometimes when we start talking more about mental health, the people are more willing to share about mental health. And so when you look at the numbers overall, we see numbers trending down on a lot of these the diagnosable mental health disorders in the fire service. But you also, the fact that more people are talking about it is a success, but it could look like, oh, wait, we maybe are not doing this right. Really, you are getting people to kind of own up and talk about their signs and symptoms. So it's actually a story of success sometimes when you see those numbers go up. I think where we need to make sure that we're taking care of things is asking the questions around, do you feel supported? Do you feel like you have someone you can talk to? Next, where do we see emerging issues? Definitely leadership, taking care of the mental health of fire service leaders. In fact, and we still have the survey out and open, but the last run at the data, we had 64% of fire chiefs say that their work interferes with their family time. I think that happens pretty often to a fire chief. I think sometimes that kind of falls behind. Other areas that we heard is that about half report being anxious and on edge on a pretty regular basis. 75% report symptoms of stress and trauma within the last 30 days that they've experienced. On a positive note, more than half of fire chiefs say that they have sought some sort of therapy, which I think is fantastic. I think it speaks to that people are open to support, particularly when they're in that leadership position. Sleep is shit for fire chiefs. 83% report that they're not sleeping as much as they should. And then also on the fitness and nutrition side, like fire chiefs have a hard time taking care of themselves, I think often because they feel like this sense of guilt or there's always something more you can do. And so, getting off early to go to the gym feels like you're wasting time, but we got to kind of change that. So I think fire chiefs, another area where we're starting to make some headway is how do we do behavioral health disaster response? How on these big incidents, how do we better take care of people and how do we create a sustainable national model? So that's one area that we're kind of starting to get into where we're looking at different intervention or framework approaches. So how can we take what they're about? I'd say about a third of the states do a really great job on what they do. A third of the states have nothing, and a third of the states are trying to build something. So how do you take those lessons learned, and then how do we connect? Because we just completed a study looking at disaster response and what the stressors are, and some of them were not things I expected. Like one of the big stressors that across case studies we heard was all the people who show up wanting to help, but then what do you do with them? You don't want, I've heard of therapists like crawling under bay doors that are partially open to go in and like, hey, we can, but it's interesting when Don talked about the benefit of just if someone wants to go fishing for a day. There was a really cool study. It's one of Frank Leto's favorite studies out of Israel, looking at the firefighters there. And there's this long, like very confusing conclusion about the choice and blah, 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 blah. But really the take home of it is that if you let firefighters cope the way they want to cope after a major incident, that's what's going to be best. You have to give them, and there's some scientific term for it, but it's basically, but the challenge is you have to teach firefighters, hey, pay attention to what coping looks like for you. Where do you feel your best? Where do you kind of get your a breath of fresh air or take it easy? Take it easy. Fire chiefs are the same. Like we have to start integrating the idea that you can take a break from time to time. You could maybe walk away from your phone and probably the things are going to keep moving right along without you. So I think that it really like fostering that in terms of realizing that people actually are pretty strong in the fire service. Another area that I think is getting a lot of focus and should get a lot of focus is making sure that we have culturally competent clinicians that are connected. You don't want the first time you see a therapist or hear a therapist's name to be in the aftermath of some major incident. Like those people need to be known ahead of time. And then what are the interventions? They're amazing. The progress on understanding the brain and neuroplasticity and how your brain is remembering and forgetting things and how you can retrain your brain is freaking mind blowing. Like literally brain, like my brain it hurts thinking about all the progress. And there are interventions out there. I've actually heard, we just tested one and had like the outcomes were so good from this that our statistician said if this was a drug trial, we would quit the trial right now because the results are so good. And it's abbreviated treatments. It's 4 days instead of doing like 16 weeks of a session. It's taking a treatment and compressing it into 4 days and saying like, hey, here's the ways that you need to retrain your brain to not have that. Because really what happens when you are struggling with something like post-traumatic stress is that your body is going into this, in terms of the fight or flight, it's going into this oh shit mode. And any memories or flashbacks put you into oh shit mode, right? So if with a lot of these interventions, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, written exposure therapy, and I think ours is written exposure therapy and CBTI. So it was an intervention we tested for post-traumatic stress, nightmares, and insomnia. And it's basically retraining your brain. So when those memories come up, you don't have the emotional heat with them. So you're not having to it's all around avoidance, like being in this constant state of I'm trying to avoid these stimuli, but you can retrain your brain to not have that. You can, if you're having recurrent nightmares, you can literally rewrite the end of a nightmare and get rid of the nightmare, because you retrained your brain that that's not what happens at the end when you're in panic mode. So I think helping to expand and explore, getting these evidence-based treatments into the fire service, that's where we need to go next. Because we've always talked to, I think when people think therapy, they think like, oh, we're going to go sit on the couch and like talk about how our mothers failed us. That's not what therapy is anymore, right? I mean, some of it is, but our mothers did the best they could. But really, these therapies are around like, can you retrain the connections in your brain? We have one that we're working on with the Ohio State, and they're going to start doing scans of brains and look at how does someone in public safety, how does their brain look different? How is it activated different? And then going back to like sleep and the research on sleep and your emotional reactivity, like if you're really pissed off and angry, there's a study that showed short sleeping for even one night increases the shoot, I'm looking for the word,
amygdala activation.
Amygdala activation, thank you, by 60%. So like when we talk about this holistic approach, we've talked about mental health being like, think harder, think stronger. No, like sometimes it's just take a freaking nap. So we know that now. And so I think as we integrate all these things, like every peer team should be talking about screening for sleep apnea and other sleep disorders, because 36.7% of the fire service or some ridiculous number like that have sleep disorder. And it's often undiagnosed. More often than not, it's undiagnosed. And you are 3.81 times as likely to have depression if you have a sleep disorder. So like, that's the cool thing about where we're at, is now we are understanding mental health and behavioral health is being complementary, but also we're understanding that it's not just you're just mentally weak. It's actually the biology of your brain. It is your environment. It's all these things. Like, it's so really, really cool stuff in the future in terms of emerging issues. So Don, I talk short.
No, that was perfect. And Sarah, I'm going to come back to you because I want to give you a little bit of time to think about. I'm going to ask you to spend my $1 million, right? And with some of these emerging things that are coming. So I'm going to give you a minute because I want to talk to Brittany about something here real quick. But I want you to be twisting your proverbial mustache on what if you had my $1 million to spend, and you see some of these emerging treatment programs that are coming out where it's not me sitting on the couch and talking about my mom. I want you to spend my money, and in just a minute. And all right, so I'm going to come back to you, Brittany. Who's doing well and why? So you see it in your research, you see it in your outreach, that there are people who are struggling with post-traumatic stress, that it's impacting their sleep, it's impacting their family dynamics, substance use, risky behaviors, right? All these other things that people are doing who are perhaps not doing well or reacting well to some of the stressors. Who's crushing it, and why are they crushing it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And Sarah mentioned it a little bit with the Israeli study and allowing firefighters to cope in the way that works best for them. I think that is similar in the fire service. If you find what works for you, so it's not a one size fits all. It's the person that works out all the time and eats really well, they're doing well. It's not just that. It's the person that is, first of all, open and honest. But also the educated person. I feel like the more you know, the better armed you are, right? The bigger your toolkit is, and the better you can recognize these things in yourself. So part of it is the self-awareness of like when you're feeling stressed out, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling like being able to name those feelings and being able to address those things, and then finding what works for you, right? So if you offload frustration by listening to loud, angry, screaming music. Like if you offload your frustration by boxing or working out or playing basketball or like whatever it is. So find what works for you. Those are the people that are doing well. And Chief mentioned it earlier as well, like find your people. Find your people at Metro Chiefs. Find your people at a firefighter conference. Find your people outside of the fire service if that's what works for you. Mm-hmm. But find your people, right? And have whatever it is that works for you. Like it's wine night with the girls. It's basketball night with the guys. It's, like find your people, being able to recognize signs and symptoms in yourself. That self-awareness is huge. And I think as humans, I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but did you perceive that like, oh, I'm 18, I'm an adult, like I know all these things. Oh my God, we don't know anything. And we're still learning so much about ourselves and how to recognize, like, even if you're feeling angry, like how long did it take you into like your 30s to be able to recognize emotions and put a name to them? Like I'm still learning how to do that. And it helps in your friendships and your relationships, whether that be at work with your coworkers or your relationships with your friends or significant others. Like it helps to be able to feel like, oh, I'm feeling like angry with you because this, and like, but being able to name and identify those emotions, so important. And it takes us such a long time as adults to learn how to do that. But I think the people that are out there crushing it are the people that can recognize how they're feeling, and that can identify the ways that you can offload and healthfully identify these things, right? And whether or not they're comfortable with being open about like going to therapy, like that, I don't even think is necessarily a marker of how well you're doing. But if you can identify in yourself that you need to go to therapy, whether that's talk therapy or EMDR or medication therapy, like whatever that looks like, being able to do those things, like huge night and day, just the education and the recognition.
Thank you, Don. We used to have these conversations with recruits that were coming in, right? The academy's getting ready to start, like clear the decks, get rid of your distractions. And that really evolved over time into a conversation with them about resilience. And Sarah, I know you don't love that word, but it would talk to them about it in the context of that, like this bucket, right? Your bucket is your life, right? And life constantly pours things into the bucket, right? And in public safety, whether that's police, fire, whatever, some of these higher stress jobs, it fills a little more quickly, right? But the drains at the bottom tended to be financial stability, spirituality, sleep health, physical health, diet, solid relationships, things like that if you could control early or pay close attention to, they were drains that were open at the bottom of this bucket, right? And when you think about it, you've worked with people over time who perhaps have gone through a divorce, right? And it closes the relationship valve. It closes the financial stability valve. It closes the sleep valve, right? And all of a sudden, it's pouring over the top, right? The stress that's poured in through regular, just everyday life, or through then the stressors that come along with this job, that if you can control what you can control to maintain that resilience and that equilibrium, right? Are we having enough of those conversations with the recruits when they're coming in to let them know, like, you're going to get more in your bucket? And because of that, it means you need to pay more attention to keeping your drains clear. Are you having those conversations when you were there, and are they effective?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we found that the resiliency training that we have, we're very much involved with it, and again, we put everybody in our whole organization through it, not only our firefighters but our support staff as well, just because they take on stressors too, from being in our world and being part of our family, and so that resiliency training was not a one-time thing. We continue to relook at it and revisit it so that people are reminded about that. We have these really cool posters that we put in all of our floors in our admin building, at our training center. They're in all of our fire stations. They're everywhere our folks are at. And then the other part too is that we capture our recruits early in their academy, not at the very end, but early in our academy, to work on resiliency, give them those tools so they have them right off. And we find that, and I'm a big believer in bud nipping, that if we can take care of things when they're small, and that we can give them tools or we can give them resources to take care of it when it's small, then that's that much better. And that becomes a success. And then that really provides momentum for them, that they see that it works, so that they know, I can't let these things fester. I can't let these things go on. And so for our recruits, we put them through our resiliency training, and it's done by us so that they know that we're the ones that are speaking to it and we're part of them. And then we revisit with them later on as when they're part of those crews, when they're back out on the line. And so they're seeing these more and more and more so that they know it's not just, oh, I had that way back in the academy. And as you know, in the academy, you're getting so much thrown at you. Truly, it's drinking out of the fire hose or trying to drink out of that fire hose. So there's so much coming at them that we realize that. But we want to give them that base, and then we'll come back after and revisit that with them as well, too.
It's awesome. Sarah, you've been working diligently. Go ahead.
Really quick, Alec, I was going to go back to Brittany and say I tried that girls' night out thing, but my wife said that was not going to happen, so...
I got yelled at for the girls' wine club too. So yeah, it did not work out well. Speaking of, that relationship strength and stability.
Yeah.
Smart move there, mister. Yeah. I'm sure Vicky kept you.
Sorry guys. It worked great for me.
I'm sure. Yeah. All right, Sarah, you've been working diligently over there calculating my $1 million. But I want to ask you I have two questions, and I can't believe it's already been over an hour that we've been talking, but I have two questions as we kind of start to wind down here. One is I asked Brittany, right, what individuals are crushing it and why. What organizations, in your travels have you seen who are crushing it? They've got all of the things that they need in place or some really innovative things, and then spend my $1 million. Like, what is out there that is new, emerging technology approaches to caring for people, people's behavioral health, mental health, wellness, and that we should be looking at as fire chiefs or executive leadership, and even in city leadership, right, for our police partners as well. What's out there that you can spend my bazillion dollars? I'll elevate it. I'll give you $1 billion instead of just $1 million.
And you're starting with nothing.
Yes.
I get $1 billion.
You get $1 billion just today. Today only. It's a 1-day deal. So
I've been making my notes. I have your plan in place, and I was trying to make sure it stayed within $1 million. But since I can do whatever I want, then okay.
Let's go. So, let's do it.
Where I would start is I would make sure that your department has a peer team. I would select the peers there's a really cool process that John Oates taught me, where you basically send a survey out to the department and you say, if you're having a problem, personal or professional, who within the organization would you go to talk to? And across the board with the departments we've done this with, half are people you'd expect and half are people who both the organization and the people are shocked that they are on the list. So I think being proactive about it, like, this should not be a stepping stone to put on your CV. It should be actually a trusted people and influencers. And actually, if I have $1 bazillion, I would probably do it with what's called a network analysis, where you do peer nominations and you can see like where you have like who your influencers are and who, more importantly, who's left on the outside, who's not connected. So I'd make sure that I would use a cool evidence-based tool to do that, or that survey. I would bring people in and I would do a peer training. If you already had a peer support training, I'd still do a peer support training because we want to make sure that people are up to speed. Then I would set that team up for success, where you would fund them to do what needs to basically do what Don said, hands off. Like, I'm here to help. Let me know what you need. And so I'd empower that team. I would put someone in charge of it who has some decision-making ability. I would make sure that there are department-wide trainings, quarterly department trainings that have some flavor of mental health, not all like you're going to get PTSD, but around like, hey, here's signs and symptoms. I would make sure that every firefighter is screened and on an annual basis and knows what their mental health looks like and knows what to do with that. So if they need a referral to services, that we can get them a referral to services. I track this across time so we know where we're at when we started, where we're at 6 months in, where we're at a year in. Well, actually, I would probably only have them do the assessment every year, but I would make it available to them in case they wanted to do it on an as-needed basis. So that I would then also make sure that my peer support team is meeting at least every other month. So they are supporting each other. I would do it with like because it's unlimited funds. I'd say, hey, come in. We're going to sit down. We're going to bring in lunch. We're going to have a brief training on some new issue, and then we're going to have some collaboration. I would also set them up with a mentorship program so the new peer supporters could be with a peer supporter who's done it for a while and does a really good job at it. I would then bring my company officers in and anyone who's in charge of people, and I would train them. Hey, you might be a peer supporter for the folks at your level, but here's what to watch for. And here's how to have a difficult conversation if someone underneath you that reports to you is struggling. So they feel empowered to like be able to lead, but also feel like they know how to address those issues, and make sure that everyone had some sort of awareness around things like suicide prevention and some of the tools, like some of the things that it's so basic around, like if someone's struggling and you have them make a list of like what they live for. If someone has a gun and they're having some suicidal thoughts, it put in with their gun case a picture of what matters to them. So some of it's just those types of things. I would make sure that it's integrated, like Don said, into Recruit Academy. I would also do a program that was focused on retirees. Like as you're getting ready to retire, this is a huge transition. I would make sure that integrated into the program is not only screening, but screening for sleep disorders. I'd have part of the education be on sleep and the importance of sleep. I would have a whole section of it where you could bring families in and talk about both in recruit school and for fire. I would create a network of families to make sure that your families are connected. Give them some education and resources around like, hey, here's what being in the fire service is like, but also here, you guys stay connected. And we'd have some regular meetups there. We would also make sure that we had some resources and that the peer team was set for if someone is injured or disabled. So there's a set plan for that. We can make sure we're taking care of someone. Someone goes out with a cancer diagnosis, we've got a plan for who's going to check in with them, something that's ongoing, make sure we're set for that. Then I would, if it's $1 bazillion, I would hire clinicians to be in-house. And those clinicians, I would want someone who is vetted by the peer support team, that they're like, this person's not an idiot. And I would make sure that those folks get a chance to sit and eat dinner with everybody in the station at some point or another. So when someone's struggling and then everyone's got their card, I would have stuff in the firehouse, whether it's like a coffee cup or one of the coolest things I saw was when Honolulu did it, they like had their own logo. And so it was like a cool thing. And then they had like coffee mugs. And it's just like, you want to fill people's spaces with things that take them back to like, hey, this is a resource we have. So I would do that. And then I would do a review of all policies to make sure that we're taking care of stuff. I would integrate some education on workplace civility. We designed one evidence-based. I'm not making this up. This is what the evidence pointed us to. It's called Don't Be an Asshole. Very comprehensive. We have a version that's Be Kind, the importance of workplace civility, if we need to go that direction. And I do think it's like, it's even around, like we talk about discrimination, harassment, and all those things. That's not an HR issue. It's a health and wellness issue, right? It's a health and safety issue. I would also, let me check my notes. I would have the training, but I would retrain. Like it has to be this ongoing conversation. And then I would regularly reevaluate how are our peers doing, because we're hearing a lot about peer team burnout because they're getting so overused, which is awesome. But I would make sure that we also had a resource list for both our peers and the department of, hey, here's what all these different interventions are. Here's where you can find them in the community. Ideally, my clinician would also be working in the community with different resources and be able to be like, hey, you might need something beyond what your peers can provide, what I can provide. Let me hook you up with this clinician in the community that does EMDR, or let me send you to this, the Center of Excellence, or, you're struggling with X, Y, and Z. This is the intervention that you need for it. And those would all be known ahead of time. And I think that was my list. And that's in year one.
In the first 15 minutes of your leadership journey, this is what you're going to knock out.
And Brittany's like, yeah, this would be like consistent with what Sarah does, because I'm thinking we can do all the things at the same time. But no, I'm just telling you what to do because it's your money. So in terms of who's doing it really well, some really cool stuff going on. Florida is doing a killer job. The Second Alarm Project there is fantastic. And they've built out an app where and they're looking to expand that to where you can find a clinician near you. I think there's some really cool apps looking at like peer support. If you don't want a peer supporter in your department for one reason or another, it'll connect you with a peer supporter in another place. That's super cool. Ohio's also doing they've done a great job also regionalizing, because that's the next thing I would do. Year two, I would connect with other people in the community. So there's a regional approach. So if your peers are overwhelmed, we've got peers that are known from a city or a town or a district over. Ohio's doing a great job. Minnesota has started a really cool like regional program where they do outreach. So I think there are a lot of really cool things going on. My things that I'm most excited about, I think getting peers, mentors of other peers that have been around for a long time is really cool. But one of the coolest on technology, there is a new, and it's just being launched. Like they're still testing it, but it's an AI assisted cognitive behavioral treatment approach. And you can basically have a conversation so it's not ChatGPT, but it's another where they've trained it for public safety and military. So you can have those conversations. Now it's meant to be used as an adjunct to therapy. So like you can still engage with this thing any time, day or night. And it gives you, but you also have control. It's a company out of the UK that we're working with. It also gives you control over what you share with your therapist. So, but it would, like the plan is it connects you with the therapist, and it would make sure that we had telehealth available. I think that's it.
So, and scene. Brittany, what did she forget? Because I'm sure there's something out there that you were thinking about while she was talking that you were like, oh, I want to add this. I want to add this. Add away.
But did you have it on a Post-it?
Well, first of all, I have all the Post-its. I love Post-its. But do you guys on this call and anyone that's listening to this podcast, seriously, when Dr. Sarah Jenke speaks, is there a possibility to have any more room for thoughts in your brain, like beyond what she has ideas for? I can't imagine that
those who listen to this on Spotify won't be able to see the smoke pouring from her ears as the engine was running at red line.
Up there.
She has so many ideas. I can't believe anyone listening to the podcast is like, oh, but wait, she didn't say Shirley should. No, the only other thing, and I think she did say this, but the only thing I would elaborate on is supporting our peer support. But I think that is part of something she said. So no, I don't think that there's any way to add to anything the incomparable Sarah Jenke says. Like she basically covered it.
Oh, and I would buy them all memberships to Science to the Station so they can join our Mental Health Alliance and come to our conference. They would come to our conference, and yeah.
I do like something that I would like all the things you said, Sarah, just to be clear. But one of the things that you said was about the mental health screening. And I promise this will be kind of the last topic because, you know, a lot of the things that we provide to our members requires action on their part.
Yeah.
And in my experience, sometimes people who need help the most won't take that action, right? I equate it to having a fire station on every corner of your community and nobody calls 911 when there's a fire, right? So the fire stations become useless. The peer support team becomes useless. The chaplain program, the direct services that we have through Bauer Psychological for our members becomes useless if they don't take that action. And I like that you brought that up about the sort of passive alarm if part of our annual physical process, and I know LifeScan has this, I know First Responder Behavioral Health does this. I've had relationships with them before with LifeScan. They have this passive like assessment tool that can help you evaluate yourself. And it comes back to you and goes to your clinician, doesn't go to your bosses, right? It comes to you and you go, okay, am I drinking more than my peers, my peer group? Am I sleeping less than my peer group? How do I rate with levels of anxiety or depression or evidence of post-traumatic stress? And so I think it's really important to have that silent alarm, that fire alarm in the ceiling that detects smoke before it gets really advanced. And so I want to just restate that. Sarah, you said it, but I think it's critically important that we have some mechanism for that and that we work hard to build the trust within our team so that they know we're not, like, I'm not looking for this for me. I'm looking for this for you, and to make sure that you retire happy and healthy and have a really long retirement. Get the most out of that state retirement system. I don't want the state keeping any of my money. So I think that's super important. I hate to say this, but I think we have to go, and I'll leave it up to others around me, Todd and Otto and you guys, really, about whether or not we come back and we focus in on specific areas of this, because like there's so much there. And I think we could do an entire episode just on the emerging treatments. You mentioned EMDR. There's probably people who are listening to this podcast have no idea what EMDR is, right? And digging into some of those things, how they work and why they work and what they cost and those kinds of things could be super helpful for the fire chiefs that listen to this podcast. So anyway, any closing thoughts that any of you want to share before we kind of sign off of this today?
My closing thought is that what a win, right? Like what a win that we're having this conversation. What a win that Metro wanted to highlight it. What a win that we're at the point in time where there are so many resources, that we have so much research on this. Like we are really doing a great job. In fact, we have so much to be proud of. More is needed always, but I just want to take a moment to celebrate. Like we talk about culture change. This is culture change. We're doing it, and it's cool to be part of it.
Brittany, thoughts?
Yeah. So it's not, I don't think that guys are so much into the like self-care thing. Like women are all about, yeah, like self-care. Yes, I'm all about self-care, but I think that in the fire service, they are very much about taking care of their trucks and their equipment and front facing and being professional looking. And part of that is taking care of yourself. And so it doesn't have to mean self-care, like you go to the spa and put the cucumbers on your eyes and you have a hot towel on your, like it can, if you like that, but it doesn't have to be that. So think about self-care in a new way and coming to work prepared to be the best firefighter that you can be, the best engineer, the best officer, the best whatever it is. And then also you should be going home and being the best there that you can be, the best father, wife, husband, spouse, child, whatever it is. And the best friend, like showing up for your friends as well. And the only way you can do that is if you're taking care of yourself as well. You're refilling your bucket, as Chief said, right? And finding the things that work for you. So Sarah said it, it's a tiny win. It's a huge win that we're talking about this, and we'll take all the tiny wins as we go and just keep remembering like how to make ourselves better. And part of that comes through looking in and figuring out how to take care of ourselves. So I'm really glad that we had this discussion today. I think it's so important.
Brittany, thank you. Don, what's on your mind as we wrap up?
I want to talk to the Metro Chiefs a little bit and my peers and what Brittany talked about. You're the leader of your organization and you are responsible in essence for everything. And so I get the burden and what that responsibility, how that weighs on you. But also, if you're not whole and if you're not healthy and if you're not happy and if things aren't going well for you, it makes it that much more of a grind to be that leader. And so like Brittany was talking about and what Sarah was talking about is this is our opportunity to make sure that we're healthy and that we take some time for ourselves. I do like the cucumbers on my eyeballs. That's wonderful. But whatever it is, Chiefs, is know that it's okay for you to get a tune-up, to go and see someone, to go and do something else, to get away and reconnect and rejuvenate yourself a little bit. And I think it's important that we as Chiefs do those types of things so that we are there for our folks and we can be that leader that they expect us to be and that we expect us to be. And so I'm with Sarah. And with Brittany, this is a huge win for us. We don't typically talk about this. We're talking about it more. But at the Metro Chief level, this is really the first time that we're talking about this for our chiefs and how you all need to be engaged in your health and making sure that you're whole. Because we do this all the time. Oh, I'll do that later. Or I'll do this, or I'm here for that person. I'm here for that. And we forget about ourselves. So I'm 100% guilty of that. I'm looking over to Alec, and I know that he is as well too. So I'm speaking to him too. Is we need to take time for ourselves. We need to be able to make sure that we're whole, so that we're the leaders that we can be. And thanks for the opportunity, Alec. I really appreciate it. I'd love to come back.
It's my pleasure.
With this group here, I think it'd be fun to come back and talk a little bit more about this.
It would be, I'm interested because we touched on it a couple of times, the concept of the fire chief health, right? If you're not healthy, it's hard to lead a healthy organization. I know Sarah's doing some work around the Chief Strong project, right? And perhaps we come in and dig a little bit more deeply into that project. But in the interest of people's commute, right? So right now we've got 40 minutes on your way to work and 40 minutes on your way back, and you can listen to the whole episode. So we'll have to carve that out of maybe one of the future episodes. And so I am going to wrap this up. I want to thank LifeScan for bringing this up, right? And really encouraging the Metro Chiefs to have this conversation. And we went so long that Todd had to duck off because I don't know, he's got a job and apparently we don't, But anyway, I'm really grateful that he brought this up and engaged the Metro to start talking about this. I know that he comes at this out of a passion for the health and wellness of firefighters and his experience, and so super grateful. So that's it for today's episode of the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Leadership Development Podcast. And thanks to anybody who's still with us, who did the long commute with us and took the time to listen. This series, as a reminder, is created by Metro Chiefs for Metro Chiefs, but the lessons and things that we talk about here and explore really apply to leaders at every level across departments of all sizes here in the U.S. or our partners in the FEU and the UK and all those places all around the world that might listen to this. So if you enjoyed the conversation, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Spotify accounts, and how my 16-year-old daughter could tell me how all that works, but click the like button or whatever and follow us so that when we post those things. Was that good, Sarah? Did you like that? I pulled that out. Sure. But if you enjoyed it, let people know about it and share it with your colleagues, not because we make money or care if we got a bazillion likes, but because this message is really important for fire chiefs and chief officers all around the country to hear. And if you know about a topic that you think we should cover, send us an email and we'll get after it. So in the meantime, keep crushing it out there. And until next time, please continue to live out the Metro vision of being a place to belong and inspiring success.